What happens when a man trained to eliminate threats becomes the biggest threat in a prison full of killers? The prison gates clanged shut behind Marcus Carter. The sound echoed through the cold, gray walls like a final warning. He didn't flinch. A guard nudged him forward. "Keep moving." Marcus stepped into the yard, his sharp eyes scanning everything. The cracked pavement, the rusting weight benches, the clusters of inmates watching his every move. Some whispered, others just stared. New fish, fresh meat. They always noticed the new guy. But Marcus wasn't just any new guy. He moved with quiet confidence, his broad shoulders relaxed, his expression unreadable. He wasn't scared. That in itself made people curious. A group of inmates near the fence exchanged looks. "Who's he?" one muttered. "No idea," another whispered back. "But he don't walk like a rookie." The guards led Marcus inside, down a dimly lit hallway that smelled of sweat and disinfectant. Metal doors slammed, keys jingled. Every sound was harsh, deliberate. Finally, they reached his cell. "Carter!" a guard barked, unlocking the door. "This is your bunk." Marcus stepped inside. The space was small, claustrophobic. Just two beds, a metal toilet, and a single window with bars too thick to ever break. His cellmate, a wiry young man in his 20s, sat on the lower bunk, arms crossed. "Darnell." He eyed Marcus warily. "You new here, huh?" Marcus didn't answer. Darnell smirked. "Yeah, quiet types don't last long. You got a gang yet?" Marcus shook his head once. Darnell leaned in, lowering his voice. "Listen, man, the Iron Fangs run this place. You don't mess with them. You keep your head down, do your time, and stay out of their way." Marcus met his gaze, held it. Darnell swallowed. He wasn't sure why, but something about Marcus unsettled him. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. Something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. Outside, voices echoed through the halls. More whispers, more rumors. Marcus Carter had arrived, and the prison was already watching. Marcus felt the stares before he even saw them. Across the yard, a group of men stood together, watching him like hunters sizing up prey. The Iron Fangs, the most feared gang in the prison. Ruthless, organized, deadly. At the center stood Razor, lean, tattooed, with a cruel smirk. Beside him, Lynch, his enforcer, broad-shouldered and brutal. His knuckles were scarred from years of making examples out of people. Razor tilted his head. "New guy walks like he owns the place." Lynch cracked his knuckles. "We'll fix that." Marcus could feel their eyes drilling into his back. He knew their type. Predators looking for weakness. But he wasn't prey. Darnell sat across from Marcus at the picnic table, his voice low. "They don't like when people don't fall in line. You need to be careful." Marcus didn't look up. "Noted." Darnell exhaled sharply. "No, man. You don't get it. They run this place. You either play by their rules or you don't last." He hesitated. "They already decided. You're next." Marcus's gaze lifted, calm and unwavering. "Then they better not miss." Darnell stared at him, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. Later in the mess hall, the first move came. Marcus carried his tray toward an empty table when Razor stepped in his way. A deliberate collision. Marcus's tray tipped. Food splattered onto his shirt. The room fell silent. Razor smirked. "Watch where you're going, old man." His voice was slow, mocking. The inmates watched, waiting for Marcus to react. A shove, a punch, something. But Marcus didn't blink, didn't speak. He wiped his shirt with slow, deliberate movements. Then with the same unshaken calm, he met Razor's gaze. Held it. For a second, something passed between them. Something unspoken. Then Marcus turned and walked away. Murmurs rippled through the room. Lynch frowned. "You see that?" "He just walked," Razor muttered, his smirk fading. "He ain't scared," Lynch said. "He's testing us." Razor clenched his jaw. "Then we test him back." His eyes darkened. Tonight, the prison showers echoed with the sound of running water. Steam curled through the air, masking the tension that thickened with every passing second. Marcus stood under the stream, letting the heat loosen his muscles. He knew this was coming. They always attacked when a man was most vulnerable. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Marcus didn't turn around. He listened. 3 of them. One heavy, lumbering, one fast, eager, and one patient. Lynch. A low chuckle. "Told you he'd be alone." Marcus shut off the water. The room was silent now, except for the dripping from his soaked skin. He didn't move, didn't rush. Let them come. Lynch took a step forward. "Razor ain't happy, old man." His voice was almost casual, but there was an edge, a hunger for violence. Marcus grabbed his towel, slow and controlled. wrapping it around his waist. He turned, locking eyes with Lynch. Lynch smirked. What? Nothing to say. Marcus said nothing. The second man lunged first, a makeshift blade flashing in his hand. Sloppy, impatient. Marcus sidestepped. Fast. Precise. He caught the man's wrist, twisting sharply. A sickening pop. The knife clattered to the floor. The third attacker rushed in. Marcus drove an elbow into his ribs, then sent a brutal palm strike to his throat. The man staggered, choking. Lynch's smirk disappeared. Marcus hadn't just fought back. He had ended it in seconds. The two men groaned on the wet tiles, writhing in pain. Marcus turned to Lynch, stepping closer, calm, unshaken. Lynch raised his hands, pretending to surrender. All right. Damn, man. Then he struck. A fast punch aimed at Marcus's jaw. Marcus moved first. His hand shot up, catching Lynch's wrist mid-swing. A quick, brutal twist. Lynch's scream echoed off the walls as his wrist snapped. He fell to his knees, cradling his broken hand. Eyes wide, terrified. Marcus crouched beside him, his voice low. You don't want to do this. Lynch's breathing was ragged, his face twisted in pain. The doors burst open. Guards rushed in. Break it up! Marcus raised his hand, stepping back. He knew the rules. He let them grab him, but his point had been made. Lynch stared up at him, clutching his wrist, sweat dripping down his face. Marcus Carter wasn't a victim. He was something else entirely. The fight changed everything. By morning, everyone in the prison knew what had happened in the showers. The whispers spread fast, slithering through the cells, the yard, the mess hall. Marcus Carter, the quiet old man who took down 3 Iron Fangs alone. Even the guards talked about it, their usual indifference replaced with quiet curiosity. Who was he? Where did he come from? Men had fought the Iron Fangs before. No one had ever walked away untouched. Marcus? He didn't just walk away. He walked through them. Darnell studied him that afternoon, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. I gotta ask, man. He hesitated, lowering his voice. Who the hell are you? Marcus didn't answer. Darnell sighed, shaking his head. Come on, ain't no way you're just some regular dude doing time. I saw what you did. That was military precision. Marcus exhaled, leaning against the cold concrete wall. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he spoke. I was Black Ops. Darnell blinked. Like government-type Black Ops? Marcus nodded. The younger man let out a low whistle. Man, that explains a lot. He studied Marcus again, his usual playful attitude replaced by something serious. So what happened? Why are you in here? Marcus's expression darkened. His jaw tightened. Darnell had pushed too far. He started to backtrack. Hey, if you don't want to talk about it. But Marcus surprised him. I was part of a team, Marcus said quietly. Missions nobody talks about. Missions that never officially happened. His voice was even, but there was something beneath it, something heavy. Darnell sat down listening. Marcus continued. One day, a mission went bad. People died. His fingers curled slightly. I was ordered to do something I wouldn't, and just like that, I became a problem. Easier to make me disappear than admit the truth. Darnell frowned. So they framed you? Marcus smirked, but there was no humor in it. They didn't have to. A man like me? Once they call you a threat, they don't need proof. Darnell leaned forward, eyes wide. Damn, you're telling me the government just threw you in here and left you to rot? Marcus shrugged. Something like that. Silence stretched between them. The weight of Marcus's words hung in the air. Finally, Darnell exhaled. Man, you could kill everyone in here, couldn't you? Marcus didn't answer. Didn't need to. Darnell let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head. You know what? I'm just glad we're on the same side. Marcus gave him a small, knowing smirk, then stood and walked away. Behind him, the whispers continued, and now they carried a new kind of fear. Razor sat in the corner of the yard, his fingers drumming against his knee. His jaw was clenched so tight, it looked like his teeth might crack. Lynch sat beside him, wrist wrapped in a crude bandage. His face was twisted with pain and humiliation. Marcus had broken him. The iron fangs weren't used to losing. "Man, we gotta do something," one of the gang members muttered. "We let this slide. People are gonna think we're weak." Razor's eyes darkened. Weakness was death in this place. If they didn't handle Marcus, their control over the prison would crumble. Lynch leaned in, his voice sharp. "We jump him. 5-on-1. No way he walks out of that." Razor didn't respond right away. He was still thinking about what he had seen. Marcus moving like a damn ghost, breaking men apart like they were nothing. The old man wasn't normal, but he was still just one man. Razor inhaled deeply. "All right," he said finally. "We do this in the yard. Broad daylight. Make a statement." Lynch nodded. "Guards?" A smirk crept onto Razor's face. "Daniels owes us. He'll give us a blind spot. No cameras, no interruptions." Daniels, a corrupt prison guard who turned a blind eye as long as the price was right. They had done plenty of favors for him. Now it was time to cash in. That night, Razor met with Daniels in a quiet hallway near the storage area. "You sure about this?" Daniels muttered, glancing around. "That guy's dangerous." Razor smiled coldly. "And we're not," Daniels sighed. "Fine. You get 10 minutes. That's all I can give you." Razor nodded. "More than enough." Back in the cell block, Lynch sat on his bunk, flexing his injured hand. His eyes burned with hatred. "This time," he growled, "I'm taking that old man down myself." Razor shook his head. "Number, you're sitting this one out." Lynch's face twisted in anger. "The hell I am." Razor grabbed him by the collar, dragging him close. "You already lost once," he hissed. "If you lose again, you make us look weaker." He shoved him back. "Sit down and shut up." Lynch fumed but said nothing. Razor turned to the rest of the gang. "5 of you. You hit him hard, fast. I want him broken." Darnell overheard everything, and he ran straight to Marcus. "They're coming for you, man," he whispered, eyes wide. 5 of them, maybe more." Marcus didn't even look surprised. He simply exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Let them come." Darnell blinked. "That's it? That's all you gotta say?" Marcus glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "You don't win fights by talking." Darnell shook his head, both impressed and terrified. Tomorrow the yard would become a battlefield. The sun hung low over the prison yard, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The air was thick with tension. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Marcus walked across the yard, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. He could feel the stares, the murmurs. The whole prison was watching. Then they moved. 5 men. They stepped out from different directions, closing in like a pack of wolves. Razor leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watching with a cruel smile. This wasn't just a beating. This was a message. Marcus stopped, calculated, calm. Lynch stood at the front, grinning despite his bandaged wrist. "Ain't so tough now, huh?" No response. Lynch's grin faltered. He wanted Marcus angry, unbalanced. But Marcus didn't give him anything. The first man lunged, fast but sloppy. Marcus sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. A sickening pop. The man howled, crumpling to the ground. The second attacker came in swinging. Marcus ducked, then drove his elbow into the man's ribs, twice. The inmate staggered, gasping for air, before Marcus grabbed the back of his head and smashed it into his knee. 2 down. The third and fourth hesitated. Lynch snarled, "Don't just stand there, finish him!" The third man rushed in, shiv flashing in his grip. Marcus moved first, smooth, controlled. He caught the man's wrist, twisted hard, and drove a knee into his gut. The shiv clattered to the ground. Marcus followed up with a sharp strike to the throat. The man collapsed, choking. The fourth guy took a step back, fear in his eyes. "Do it!" Razor shouted. The last attacker hesitated. Too long. Marcus closed the distance, deflecting a weak punch before sending a brutal palm strike straight to the man's face. Blood sprayed as he hit the ground. Now it was just Marcus and Lynch. Lynch's breathing was ragged, his eyes wide. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You're still dead." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying him. Lynch roared and charged. Marcus didn't move. Waited. At the last second, he sidestepped, caught Lynch's arm, and sent him crashing face first into the pavement. Silence. The entire yard stared. Marcus crouched beside Lynch, lowering his voice. "You don't own this place." He leaned in closer. "Not anymore." Razor's smirk disappeared. The guards blew their whistles, running in. Too late. Marcus raised his hand, stepping back. He had already won. Lynch groaned, barely conscious. The Iron Fangs had been humiliated, broken, and every single inmate saw it happen. The balance of power had shifted. The yard was dead silent. Lynch lay motionless on the pavement, his breath ragged. The other gang members groaned, clutching their injuries. 5 men down, 1 man standing. Marcus. The Iron Fangs had ruled this prison for years. Not anymore. The guards stormed in, shoving inmates aside. Too late. The damage was done. Everyone had seen it. "Back against the wall," one of the guards barked. Marcus raised his hands, moving slowly. He wasn't stupid. He knew how this worked. The guards didn't care who started it, only who finished it. 2 officers yanked Razor up, dragging him toward the entrance. His lip was busted, his jaw clenched in barely contained rage. "This ain't over," he hissed. Marcus just stared, unshaken, unbothered. Lynch was next. His face was pale, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. His eyes flickered toward Marcus, and for the first time there was no arrogance, no hate, just fear. The guards pulled Marcus aside. He expected the usual: punishment, isolation. But something was different. Officer Daniels was waiting, arms crossed, jaw tight, and he wasn't happy. One of the other guards sneered. "Who the hell are you, Carter?" Marcus didn't answer. Daniels stepped forward, voice low. "You just made my life a lot harder." Marcus met his gaze, held it. Daniels scoffed. "Enjoy your time in solitary." He turned to the others. "Take him." Marcus didn't resist. He let them cuff him, let them walk him toward the gates. As he passed the other inmates, he felt their eyes on him. Some nodded, some smirked. Some looked at him like they were seeing him for the first time. Darnell stood near the fence, arms crossed. He didn't say anything, but his grin said enough. Marcus had changed the rules of the prison in a single day. The Iron Fangs weren't untouchable anymore, and every single inmate knew it. The door to the warden's office slammed shut. Warden Hayes leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. He was a man who had seen it all: riots, escapes, murders. Nothing surprised him anymore, until now. Across from him, Officer Daniels stood stiff, arms crossed. His face was red with frustration. "He took down 5 of them, sir. 5. In broad daylight. Barely broke a sweat." Hayes arched an eyebrow. "And?" Daniels clenched his jaw. "And he's a problem. The inmates are talking. Some of them already see him as some kind of legend." Hayes let out a slow breath. Legends were dangerous in a place like this. He opened the file in front of him, flipping through pages of classified documents. Marcus Carter. The name alone sent a chill through him. Decorated soldier. Black ops. The kind of missions the government didn't admit existed. Then, disappearance, a court case, a closed trial, a conviction that raised more questions than answers. Hayes looked up. "He's not just some inmate, Daniels, and you know it." Daniels scoffed. "I don't care what he was before. He's a prisoner now." Hayes smirked. "A prisoner who just dismantled the most feared gang in this facility." He leaned forward. "And you think that's a bad thing?" Daniels hesitated. Hayes continued, his voice even. "Tell me, officer, did he start the fight?" Daniels exhaled sharply. "Number. But that doesn't matter. The fact is, Hayes cut in, he handled a problem we couldn't." Silence. Daniels shifted uncomfortably. Hayes closed the file, tapping his fingers on the desk. "I looked into his case last night." His tone softened, just slightly. "It doesn't add up." Daniels frowned. "What do you mean?" Hayes leaned back, studying Marcus's file. The charges, the sentence, the way he was convicted. Too clean, too convenient. He exhaled. This man wasn't just thrown away. He was buried. Daniels shrugged. Doesn't change the fact that he's dangerous. Hayes smirked. Dangerous or useful? Daniels blinked. You can't be serious. Hayes stood, adjusting his tie. I don't waste assets, Daniels. And Marcus Carter? His eyes darkened. He's the most valuable asset in this damn prison. Daniels clenched his jaw but said nothing. Hayes picked up the phone on his desk. His voice was calm, controlled. Get me Carter. Daniels stiffened. Sir, if you're thinking of cutting him a deal. Hayes held up a hand. Relax, Daniels. I just want to talk. He smirked. Let's see what he wants. Daniels swallowed, his face unreadable. Somewhere in solitary confinement, Marcus Carter sat alone, silent, waiting. He already knew this was coming. Officer Daniels paced the hallway, fists clenched. He had a problem. Marcus Carter wasn't just another inmate. He was a ghost from a past nobody wanted to talk about. And worse, the warden had taken an interest in him. Daniels had spent years running his own system, smuggling, favors, payoffs. The Iron Fangs had been his biggest asset. And now, they were crippled, all because of Carter. Daniels stormed into the guard break room. Two officers looked up, but one quickly averted his gaze. They knew. Everyone knew. His phone buzzed. A text. Warden's opening an investigation. Watch your back. Daniel's stomach dropped. He shoved the phone into his pocket and exhaled sharply. Stay calm. Think. But there was no time. That afternoon, the warden's voice rang out over the intercom. Daniels, my office. Now. Silence. The other guards didn't even look at him. They already knew how this was going to end. Daniels straightened his uniform, squared his shoulders, and walked out. When he entered the office, Warden Hayes was already waiting. A thick file sat open on his desk. Daniels' file. Hayes didn't look up. You know why you're here? Daniels forced a smirk. If this is about Carter. Hayes slid a document across the desk. A bank statement. Unexplained deposits. Thousands. Then another paper. A list of known contraband movements. His name circled. Daniels swallowed hard. Hayes finally met his eyes. Cold, unforgiving. You got greedy, the warden said simply, and now you're done. Guards stepped in behind Daniels. No, he muttered, shaking his head. You can't. Hayes gestured. Take him. The cuffs clicked shut around Daniels' wrists. Just like that, it was over. As he was dragged out, he locked eyes with Marcus Carter. Marcus didn't smile, didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Marcus walked back to his cell, the weight of the past few days settling over him. The prison had changed. The Iron Fangs were finished. Lynch was still in the infirmary. Razor had been thrown into solitary. The rest of the gang, scattered, silent, afraid. The power had shifted. And Marcus? He was untouchable now. Darnell leaned against the cell bars, watching him. Man, you're like a ghost. No one saw you coming. Marcus smirked but said nothing. For the first time since he arrived, the prison was quiet. No more whispers. No more threats. Just respect. But Marcus knew better. Nothing stayed quiet forever. That night, a guard appeared outside his cell. Not just any guard. Warden Hayes. You've made quite a name for yourself, Carter, Hayes said, arms crossed. Marcus didn't respond. The warden smirked. I looked into your past. You don't belong here. He exhaled, studying him. But you already knew that. Marcus held his gaze, waiting. Hayes leaned in. Tell me, if you had the chance to do something bigger than this place, would you take it? Silence stretched between them. Then finally, Marcus spoke. Depends on the job. Hayes chuckled. I thought you might say that. He slid an envelope through the bars. Read it. Think it over. Then he turned and walked away. Marcus picked up the envelope, running his fingers over the seal. Official, government issue. He smirked. His story wasn't over. It was just beginning.